Hello everyone, Rick here at Rick's Automotive. In this video we're going to show you how to reseal a leaky power steering pump on your Honda Acura V6 engine. This particular vehicle is a 2006 Acura TL. Let's get started. I put the fender covers on the vehicle to protect the customer's paint. First thing I'm going to do is remove this hose from the power steering pump. Before I remove the hose, I put a shop rag underneath of it to catch any fluid that leaks out. That way I don't make a big mess on the customer's engine. I've got a screwdriver here. Go ahead and turn these tabs like so. A little hard with my left hand here. Just to remove this to make it easier, you just turn those three tabs and you lift up. I'm going to set this aside. With the plastic cover removed, I got more room to work with. I've got to remove this hose now. Before I slide this hose off all the way and to prevent me from making a large mess over this customer's engine and losing a bunch of power steering fluid, I've got this piece here. This comes on a brand new pump when you order one from Honda. So I'm just going to slide this hose off and slide this piece on as quickly as possible. Made a little bit of a mess, not too bad though. And then I've got the hose here. You want to keep the hose above the red cap here where you fill it, because if you keep this higher than the cap, nothing will come out of here. But if you lower this down, all the fluid that's in the reservoir will come out this hose. Got a small bungee cord wrapped around my hose to keep it above the cap and out of the way. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the drive belt or the serpentine belt. Okay, I've got some light now so you can see much better. The tensioner bolt is right here. It's a 14 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and get a wrench and release the tension and remove the belt. Just got a 14 millimeter long or extended wrench that I'm going to use to put on the tensioner here. Now, if this is your first time doing this, you might want to make reference of the routing of the belt. That way when you go to put it back on, you're not scratching your head. To remove the belt, you want to push the wrench towards the firewall. You don't want to jerk. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on it first. You just want to lean on it and apply your body weight to it, and it'll slowly decompress the tensioner. Got the belt off. I've got it tucked between a hose and the wiring harness. It's got a little bit of tension on it. So when I go to put this back on, all I got to do is just take this and set it back over top of the power steering pump. I did not take the belt off the lower pulleys. So the AC compressor, the crank pulley, the lower tensioner pulley, the belt is still routed below. Next, I've got the power steering line that's on top of the power steering pump. It's held on by two 10 millimeter bolts. I'm going to go ahead and remove those bolts. Got the hose off, got the rag. I've got a rag underneath of it here so I don't make a mess over the customer's intake manifold. Fluid does leak out of this, so got a rag. There's an O-ring on here as well. This O-ring is going to get replaced. We'll do that here in just a little bit. The next two bolts I'm going to take off. Actually, the only two things holding this left to do really take us off the engine is the two bolts here and here. They're both 12 millimeters. We're going to remove those. I have two 12 millimeter bolts removed. To get this out easier, there is a connector here you want to remove. Just press down on this tab, pull that and set that out of the way there, and you just pull the power steering pump out. Got the power steering pump out of the car. Here's the three gaskets or O-rings I'll be replacing. OEM Honda parts. Taking these 12 millimeter bolts, there's four here that hold the back of the case apart. That comes off. This gasket goes there. And the two O-rings go on both of the inlet and outlet hoses. So there's a 10 millimeter on the front here. This little plastic neck comes off, and there's an O-ring on the end of that. And this one here was one I showed you just a minute ago on the one we took off of the 210s that go in here. That's resting on the intake manifold. That's that guy right there. Got the pump apart. This is the one O-ring we're going to replace. This is the other one. You can actually see it on this one. It's supposed to be round, and this was flat, and it's kind of the gasket material is kind of squished there. Just want to show you how brittle these things can be. One, this thing's pretty flat from the side view. Supposed to be round. The new one here, if you can see or not, but it's round all the way around the edges there. So when these things are old and exposed to heat for a long time, they just kind of get stuck in their squished shape, and they get pretty brittle. So if you bend these things, they break pretty easily. So that's why this thing was puking out fluid. But I'm gonna go ahead and install the new O-rings. O-ring is installed. I left a little bit of oil down in the groove there to help keep the gasket in place when I go to put it on. I also lubricated this guy here. You want to make sure there's no debris on the O-ring, as well as the surface where it seals against. I clean both surfaces off. That way you get a nice tight seal. I'm going to go ahead and install these back onto the pump. Got the pump all put back together. I'm going to replace this O-ring still on the other line, as well as degrease this pump to get all this nastiness off there for the customer. I also did an inspection prior to this repair. I discovered a couple other items that required some attention. Sorry for that noise in the background. It's a tow truck dropping off another car. This is a tensioner, and you'll see here there's those lines right there. Those lines, when this is installed and there's a belt on it, those lines indicate the strength of the tensioner. And on this car, two things. One, the pulley's got a bunch of rubber on there from the old belt, so it makes a squealing sound. And the lines do not line up on this tensioner. It's a weak tensioner, so I'm just going to replace the whole unit for the customer. One other thing was the engine mounts on this are collapsed. This is resting on top of there. This bracket's resting on the mount, so that is causing some pretty harsh vibrations inside of the car. You can feel everything the engine's doing. Front engine mount is also collapsed. There's a video that I did prior on a Honda Accord that shows how to check your engine mounts. I'll put a link in the description below. That's how I determined this thing had two failed mounts. Also, the valve cover gaskets on this are leaking quite a bit actually in the front. It's making its way down on top of the converter there. So I'm replacing both the valve cover. Drop the mic, sorry. Replacing both the valve cover gaskets on this, front and rear, as well as the tube seals for the spark plugs. And yep, that's it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do those repairs and put the power steering pump back on, and then when I finish with all that, I'll go ahead and top the power steering fluid off. We'll most likely have to bleed it. I'll go through the process on how to do that to get all the air out of the system. We'll check for leaks and give this back to the customer. Want to make a note too, we are using all genuine OEM Honda parts. Always my preference. Obviously, it's up to the customer at the end of the day, but this customer chose to go the OEM route because he is planning on keeping the car for another 5 or 7 years and doesn't want to deal with any problems during that time. So we chose the OEM stuff. I'm going to do a video too of the valve cover replacement, as well as the engine mount replacement. So those links will be in the bottom description as well, along with that engine mount inspection link. Got the power steering pump installed. Everything's all cleaned off as far as the residual fluid that's spilled down. Replaced the passenger and front engine mounts and replaced the valve cover gaskets and tube seals. So now all I've got left to do to start it is bleed the power steering system, or the fluid that is from the power steering system. But first, this customer requested to change the fluid, so I'm going to go ahead and remove all the old fluid. Honda doesn't like you using flush machines, so I'm just going to use the pump for the pressure. What I've done is I've taken off the return line here, and I've attached it to a hose here that runs to just a little catch contraption that I made out of an old washer bottle. So all that power steering fluid that's in the system is going to get pushed down into the bottle. The bottle's empty, so I can see how much is actually coming out. And then once I flush that through, I've topped this off with new fluid, by the way. So it's going to get all the old fluid out and then push the new fluid through. And once the old fluid's through, I'll go ahead and attach the hose again and top the system off, and then we'll go ahead and bleed it. All right, got the hoses connected. Finished flushing the system. I've already topped the fluid off and already started the engine twice just to work the system or fluid back into the system. Last time I let it run for 15 or 20 seconds or so I know it's full. You can see the full mark is here versus upper level, and the fluid is just above that, which is okay because we're going to bleed it now, so it might drop a little bit. To bleed it, I'm going to go ahead and turn the steering wheel full turns to the right and left with the key off. That's going to any air bubbles out of the reservoir, and you may get some bubbles. It may overflow a little bit. That's okay. That's normal. That's why I've got a shop rag down there. But let's go ahead and bleed it. I just topped off the power steering fluid, started the engine, checked for leaks. We're good to go. Turn the steering wheel back and forth, make sure there's no funny noises. We're good to go on this one, so hopefully this video helped you. If it did, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching.